Hello everyone, I'm Case Banks with our Decision 2024 coverage of the campaign for Lubbock Mayor. Joining me is Adam Hernandez, one of 6 candidates on the ballot for Lubbock Mayor, to have a little conversation about the campaign and of course you, Adam. So let's start off with introducing yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Adam Hernandez, obviously candidate for Lubbock Mayor. I've lived in Lubbock my whole life. I'm a small business owner and a father. I've had 2 daughters, my oldest of whom I lost to suicide in 2018. And in the summer of 2020, I made a life decision to dedicate as much of my time as possible to community service, and so that's what I've done over the last several years. I've also been heavily involved in shaping city policy over the last several years in a variety of ways. And so because of my community service work, I was sort of recruited by community members and community leaders to run for mayor. Did that the first time in May of 2022. When we lost that election, they asked me to try again, so here I am.
And I was going to say, you've run for mayor in the past. What makes this run different? Why should folks who voted for you the first time vote for you again, and other folks to reconsider, if you will?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that are really different. So first and foremost, I've spent a lot more time involved in city politics, obviously, over the last 2 years. I didn't really quit doing my community service work because, again, that's where I come from, is that background of community service. And so I've continued that work. I've also continued being involved in city policy to try to benefit communities all over the city. And so I've learned a whole lot more, obviously, about how city policy works, how things are funded, what can be done, what can't be done, those sorts of things. Another big difference is that we've been working a lot on trying to educate people on the importance of their local vote, because our biggest challenge in the last election was the low voter turnout.
So you talked about your activism, and I've personally seen you at a lot of city council meetings and that sort of thing. Are those issues that you've dedicated time with, or time to, that you've mentioned, are those the same issues that you're looking for in this campaign, or what you hope to tackle if you are to take office?
Sure, some of it is. So for instance, when I talk about making our city financially stronger for the long term and less reliant on debt over time, that's what we as Lubbock Compact, which is the organization that I helped co-found, that's what we really focus on. And all of the policy ideas that we advocate for, that we have advocated for, are towards that goal. So in that aspect, yes, some of it does cross over with my platform, but in other ways, maybe not so much. So for instance, like the loose dog issue is something that's been a problem all across the city for a very long time. This is something that I've heard from citizens when I began my advocacy work, and it's only gotten worse. And so those sorts of issues aren't not necessarily things that Lubbock Compact takes on, but some of the things are.
And so talk to me about some of those top issues. You mentioned fiscal policy, the loose or stray dog issue. Besides that, what are some other issues that you're looking at?
Yeah, so the sort of big issue underlying all of this is that we really have to take a serious look at how we develop our city. And that is dictated by our zoning codes and building codes and things of that nature, how we design our streets, for instance, and how we design places. And so we, like a lot of other cities, after World War II, started making our city more for cars than for people. So that's created a lot of unique issues that we didn't have in cities prior to that time. And so in order to deal with those issues, we need to find better ways to develop. So for instance, instead of building out suburbs that didn't exist from basically cotton fields, we should look at infilling now areas that we've already created, as well as the older core areas of the city. So in order to do that, we need to know where we're going. We need to have a roadmap for that. So one of the first things that I'd like to do is do a value per acre analysis across the whole city. This allows us to see how efficiently or inefficiently, in our case, that we're using our land. And the reason why that's important is because that's how a city gets its income, is from property taxes, sales taxes, of course, fees. And so when you make more areas of your city more productive, you're able to ease up property taxes over time, because it sort of stabilizes those across the city versus having one area where they're really high and other areas where they're really low. So that's a benefit. But another benefit is the economic benefits that then lead to more money for services and maintenance and things of that nature, so that we don't have to go after such big road bonds in the future.
So you mentioned kind of land development and zoning. The city just went through the Unified Development Code process and is implementing those things now. How do you see yourself going back to city council, city staff, and kind of saying, let's kind of put that aside and do something more or, completely different. Do you think that's possible?
Well, it's not necessarily doing anything completely different. It's actually working with the UDC and working within the UDC. Now, there are some tweaks, modifications that can be made, and this is something that was understood even when the UDC was passed unanimously. They sort of mentioned that from the dais, that this is a living document, and the reason why is particularly because cities over time have to sort of look at what makes sense at that particular time. And so one zoning situation may work fine for some period of time, but then it may start being detrimental, and so we need to look at those things and modify as we go along. So it's not necessarily doing something entirely different. It's working with what we have and just making changes as necessary.
And you mentioned fiscal policy and kind of talked a little bit there about, ways you can bring in revenue with those land uses and that sort of thing. Do you see that as your way of bringing revenue into the city, or do you think how the city staff has proposed lowering property tax rates but still bringing in revenue off of growth, do you see that as your fiscal policy, or what are you seeing?
So it's just more of balancing it out. And so we're always going to need growth, right? If your city's not growing, if anything's not growing, it's dying, right? So we want growth, but we also can make decisions to sort of balance it out a little better. I think we need all of it. We need what Lita and Market Lubbock does to reach outside, to bring businesses here that may attract people here or provide jobs for people that live here, right? So we need those types of things, but we also need to empower more of our own community members to start small businesses. And so there's different things that we can do there to sort of lower the bar, if you will, in a safe way for the city so that more people from the community can actually create small businesses as well. And so what I talk about when I mean sort of how we design our spaces, there's this idea of the 15-minute city. And Lubbock has often touted itself as a 15-minute city in terms of driving. You can drive anywhere within 15 minutes. That's really not what that idea is supposed to mean. What it's supposed to mean is you are able to, within a 15-minute walk, do most of the things that you need to do throughout your day, if not all of them. It's sort of hard to work within 15 minutes of where you live, but most of your other things, groceries and other things of this nature. And we can sort of encourage the development of these sort of 15-minute cities all across the city, and that's what really brings up that productivity from where it is now.
So another issue that you've become literally the face of is Freedom Act Lubbock. Mm-hmm. Why make that part of your advocacy in the community, but also your campaign as well?
So it's actually not a part of my campaign. It's not a part of my platform. It is one of the dozens of things I was involved in last year. And so the reason for that, again, is so part of making our city financially stronger and improving quality of life for our neighborhoods is public safety, right? And so we don't have unlimited law enforcement officers, and we don't have unlimited law enforcement resources in terms of our DA's office, et cetera. And so in that situation, we know that we're facing some very serious things that are detrimental to our community. Fentanyl distribution, gang activity, property crimes, all of these sorts of things are really getting out of control. We're seeing a lot of gun violence in the city. These are things I think everybody would agree are the most serious things that we're facing. And simple possession of marijuana, where somebody's doing nothing other than possessing a small amount of marijuana that they may use personally, is not really high up on that list in terms of dangers to our community. And so we think that better allocating our law enforcement resources will increase the public safety. I know that the narrative has been that we're looking to decrease public safety, and the opposite is actually true.
You do say on your website that you're proud to be a part of Freedom Act Lubbock. Mm-hmm. So how can you say that's not part of your platform or your campaign?
Well, so my platform, my candidacy as a mayor is completely separate from Freedom Act Lubbock. The reason why I'm so tied to Freedom Act Lubbock is because I'm the communications chair, not only for Lubbock Compact, but for the initiative Freedom Act Lubbock. I was on the initiating committee. I myself collected thousands of signatures and was out at lots of events last year. And so I don't know that you can really separate the two, in idea, but in actuality, it's just, they're two completely separate things. The reason why it's not a part of my platform is because it's already on the ballot. There's really nothing for me to do. It's sort of up for the voters to decide.
And we've heard, anti-gang center folks have gone to the city council, said that most of the shootings in Lubbock are tied to, drugs and that sort of thing. So do you see this ordinance as a way of making the community safer if they're saying that these shootings are tied to drugs?
So the thing about like the tag presentation that was given to the city council, that was discussing almost entirely fentanyl, the fentanyl issue. And so when you talk in terms of high stakes, in terms of drug crime, it's just higher stakes with fentanyl and these other harder drugs because they make more money. They make more money with smaller amounts. And so those sorts of things, including maybe marijuana gets mixed up in that, but our ordinance covers none of that. As a matter of fact, if you are found to be drug dealing with any amount, then Prop A would not apply to you anyway. You would still get those charges.
So we talked a lot about ways to do things different in Lubbock. What would you say is something that you're proud and folks in Lubbock should be proud of when it comes to living, playing, working in this city?
You know, I think that, of course, there's always room for improvement, and many people may get on me for this, but I think our park system has been done really well as we can, given the restraints with how we've managed our finances, right? So I think we do parks really well. I am glad that this last city council did the street bond. That was something that was desperately needed. We hadn't had one in about 13 years. And I know nobody really likes to go for a bond, but really, because the cost of roads are so expensive, a city our size probably will have to do that about every 6 years. Anyway, we hadn't had one in about 13 years, so I'm glad that they did that so we can start addressing some of those needs. And I was actually on that committee. And so one of the things that I'm proud of there is that we got those needs met, so that way when we do have to go for another bond, now we can focus on older areas of the city, because that was a big criticism from some inside the loop. And we do have lots of room for improvement there. And the other thing that I think that the city has done well that sort of goes against a narrative that we've heard is how the city in general has managed our finances. We're not broke as a city. We are paying down our debt. A huge part of our debt is so that we can have water. About $700 million of that was so that we could have water for the next 100 years. And we have been steady paying that down. We have an excellent bond rating, which is the city's credit rating, and all of those things. So I think we've done some things well.
All right, Adam, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Early voting continues until April 30th. Election day is May 4th, and be sure to join us on May 4th for election coverage you can count on.